Gambling sponsors are being banned from the Premier League, but is that a good thing, and who will replace them when the time comes? In April 2023, Premier League clubs collectively agreed to withdraw gambling sponsorships from the front of their matchday shirts, which will come into effect at the end of the 25-26 season, meaning over half of the clubs in the English top flight will need to secure new front of shirt sponsors very soon, which might prove to be tricky. The Premier League isn't the first top-flight division to enact this sort of blanket ban. In 2019, the Italian government tightened regulations around gambling adverts, meaning Serie A clubs could no longer advertise betting brands on their kits going forward. The Spanish government quickly followed suit, and in 2020, they passed a law banning gambling sponsorships on football shirts. So it's clear that this is the direction football sponsorship is heading in across Europe. But how did we even get to this point in the first place? In the Premier League's inaugural season, there wasn't a single club in the division with a gambling sponsor. Electrical appliance companies had the biggest percentage of the market share back in 1992, with 23% of clubs using some form of appliance manufacturer as their sponsor. Alcohol was just behind in second, with 18% of the league wearing those. Then computing and chemical companies made up another 23% of the division's sponsors. The rest of the league's shirt sponsors were made up of a mix of industries, from sportswear brands and media companies to banks and construction firms, but zero betting companies. In fact, it would take another decade after the inception of the Premier League before we would see the first gambling sponsor on a football kit in the competition, when Fulham made the massive downgrade from Pizza Hut to Betfair in 2002. 1 decade later, in the 12-13 season, that lonesome gambling sponsor had evolved considerably, with 5 clubs now featuring gambling companies on their shirts. 6 if you include Fulham's FX Pro, which is a trading platform, so it depends how you look at it. Since then, the issue has only gotten worse, and we've ended up at the point we're at today, where if you were to pick up a random Premier League shirt off a rail, you'd be more likely to find a gambling sponsor than not, with 55% of the league wearing some form of betting company on their chests in the 24-25 season. But why has this happened? Why has gambling become the go-to for so many teams in England's top flight? And where are the JVCs, Draper Tools, Sharps and Classic FMs of today? Money. The answer's money. The Premier League was always designed to make the clubs in it rich, and as time's gone on, that's exactly what's happened. In the modern era, the sheer amount of money that clubs receive just for being in the Premier League makes low-paying sponsorships pretty much worthless to even the smallest of clubs in the competition. These clubs also aren't typically big enough to offer much value to the few companies that can afford to sponsor them, leaving them in a difficult position. Over the years, we've seen smaller clubs turn away from local companies such as radio stations and construction firms, and towards investment platforms, gambling services and breweries. With alcohol gone, the smaller clubs in the league are only really left with a few options, and most have turned to betting sites. The Big Six clubs don't need to worry about any of this, as they have the global reach to secure brand deals with companies of pretty much any size. But the clubs at the bottom have basically been forced into bed with gambling companies. They either take those deals or miss out on valuable revenue, which could be the difference between staying in the league or not. There are notable exceptions to this, of course. Ipswich Town have famously been sponsored by Ed Sheeran since 2021 and teamed up with Carers Trust prior to that, a charity that supports carers across the UK. And before that, never mind. So the question is, are we just guaranteeing even shadier sponsors in the future once the gambling brands are gone? We lost alcohol sponsors and they were replaced by gambling, and now we'll lose gambling sponsors and they'll be replaced by something else. The next wave of smaller club sponsors will probably end up being sketchy, unregulated cryptocurrency platforms who have lots of venture capital money to burn through. People will lose money, just like they do through gambling, but it'll be under the guise of investments rather than stakes, and they'll end up getting banned eventually anyway. There's a pretty simple solution to all of this though. Bring back alcohol sponsors, but only allow them to advertise the 0% versions of their products. We get the classic kits back, Carlsberg, Holston, Chang, Newcastle Brown Ale, and the smaller clubs in the league get a sponsor that can actually afford to pay them. All without advertising something that society has collectively agreed isn't great for people.